I'll just briefly explain how that creative process works, and you can just check it out and see for yourself that this is true in your own experience. I'm not asking you to believe me, but just check it out and see. Every experience or every pattern that gets established first has to start as an idea. And that idea, it's immaterial, or we could say it's the subtlest emergence into the material. But it hasn't, at that point, it has not actually developed sufficiently in order to become established as a pattern. In order for it to emerge and become established as a pattern, then you have to follow that sufficiently and give energy to it sufficiently so that it becomes established. This is why attention is so important, because when you give attention to the idea, it allows that idea to gain that energy so that it can emerge into a more substantial form or pattern. So think about a child who has not yet learned to walk. So a baby who's not yet learned to walk. And so in order, if that child is going to learn to walk, then first there has to be an idea, an impulse that arises in that child, in that consciousness, that creates this idea of walking. So if that idea is not there, then walking will never happen. The idea has to first be there. Now, it's so subtle that most people are not aware of the idea as such. They're just aware of the of the actions that follow from it. But it has to start as an idea. And then in order for it to actually become a pattern that emerges in manifest reality, it has to then be given energy, and there has to be action that's taken. The action is of fundamental importance. It's not sufficient just to have an idea. I mean, how many brilliant ideas have you had in your life? Probably many, but you have not actualized most of them. You know, it's like it's cheap and easy to come up with a great plot for a novel. It's an entirely different thing to actually write the novel. So countless people have come up with great plots, but very few of them have written the novels. And similarly, if the child only has the idea of walking but never takes the action, then walking will never happen for that child. The walking depends upon the action, but the action depends first on the idea. So there are these two components that are involved. There's the idea and there's the action. And you have to involve both in order to get this complete emergence of the learning or the manifest expression. Both are required. And why I point this out is that sometimes people focus on just one or the other. So think about it. If all you did was just take action, you could say, well, look, I'm taking so much action. Why is nothing materializing? Well, because there's nothing for it to organize itself around. It's just action, but it has no coherence. So the idea is what gives shape to the action. The idea is what directs the action. So the action is coherent and therefore can emerge as something specific. If you don't have the idea first, then you could take action till the end of time and nothing specific would emerge from that. It would just be chaos, because the idea is that organizing principle that gives the coherence to the action. Now, as I've already pointed out, if all you do is just stay with the idea, but you don't take the action, then it also remains immaterial. And here's the important point, is that this process is cyclical. It's iterative. So I cannot rule out the possibility that there has been some child at some point that never stumbled before walking. for the overwhelming majority, there's a process in which the idea is there, the action is taken, the action is not immediately the complete manifestation of the idea. The idea is to walk. The initial expression of that, or the initial action of that, does not particularly resemble walking. In order for that process to become complete, for it to become completely manifest, there has to be this iterative process where there's the idea, there's the action, then there's a comparison between the idea and the outcome of the action that gives feedback so that then there can be another action taken. It's in this way that we create everything. We create all of our experience in this way. So there's the idea, there's the action, then there's a comparison between the outcome of the action and the idea, and that serves as feedback so that we can take yet another action. And that repeats over and over and over and over, possibly endlessly. This is why people who many of us could recognize as being masters in their whatever their particular domain might be, whatever their field of study or work is. You could have somebody who you recognize as one of the greatest masters of violin or piano. And for that person, there's always more for them to refine and improve that. To you, you say, how could it get any better than that? But for them, they can always become better because there's this process continuing to go on. There's always room for improvement because there's always going to be some kind of contrast between the expression and the idea. And that serves as feedback that then allows for the next action, which further refines that. So what does this have to do with failure? Well, think about it. If a child wants to walk but refuses to fail, they will never walk. It just stays at the idea level. So there has to be a willingness to fail in order to engage in this creative feedback loop. So there has to be the idea that's first and foremost, and then there has to be action. But the action necessarily will not produce exactly the perfect outcome. It will not exactly match the idea. And so that could be considered a failure. And initially, in many things, the first action so completely it misses the mark so completely that we could consider that to be a supreme failure. You know, if the image or the idea is to walk, and what happens is you don't even get up off the, you don't even stand up at all, and you just instead fall flat on your face. That could seem so completely so complete of a failure that for many of us, if we're adverse to failure, we would stop there and never walk. This is an important point to understand because if you want some outcome in your life and you refuse to fail, then you're actually refusing to succeed. And I'm bringing this up for a variety of points, but one of them is that not too infrequently, I get messages from people and they say, well, I've been working at trying to manifest this thing for a week and it hasn't happened. Or I've been trying to manifest it for a month and it hasn't happened. I've been trying to manifest it for 6 months. It hasn't happened. It's a failure. But that's just a misunderstanding. See, you're never going to actually arrive at the absolute perfect expression of the idea. And if your sensitivity to the gap between the idea and the expression of it is so refined that you determine that any discrepancy is a complete failure, then you're going to hold yourself back from really getting the real value of the whole process.